So our lead this hour coming from Indy. The fallout continues. This story still has legs. And thank God for that. It's all because of the shot heard around the football world. We go back to the well one more time. Now, earlier this week, the angry owner, Jim Irsay, went scorched earth and fired his coach, Frank Reich, after an absolute puke-tastic performance by the Colts against the Patriots. And he replaced him with a television guy, a guy that wears makeup. Jeff Saturday is the new coach. Now, you knew about that. There's another branch to this topic tree that has some media types inflamed, enraged. Now, it involves a message from Irsay. So you maybe know where I'm going with this, perhaps not, but while announcing the coaching change recently, Jim Irsay celebrated the fact that Jeff Saturday, the old center for the Peyton Manning era Colts, that Jeff Saturday is the coach, but he's the coach and he doesn't believe in the analytics part of it. And rather than me go into this, why don't we, as Warner Wolf would say, go to the audio tape. Here's Jim Irsay explaining a net positive of having a guy who's not in bed with the analytics.
I'm glad he doesn't have any NFL experience. I'm glad he hasn't learned the fear that's in this league. That's because it's tough for all our coaches. They're afraid. They go to analytics, and it gets difficult. I mean, he doesn't have all that. He doesn't have that fear, and there was no other candidate. We were fortunate that he was available, and he has tons of experience.
Yeah, no other candidate. There was no one else on television that Jim likes, so he went with Jeff Saturday. So let us discuss the question. All right, there's a lot there. Hopefully you're paying attention. What do you make of Jim Irsay and his fresh take on coaching analytics and celebrating the fact that he hired a coach that does not believe in all that and talking about the fear of NFL coaches? So I've got frenzy of rage, orthodoxy, and Eddie Murphy. And we will tie all of these things together, and we are going to make spaghetti and meatballs is what we're going to make. So, Jim Irsay pulling the curtain back on the industrial complex of the NFL, and I will guarantee that he is not the only owner that feels this way. He's saying the quiet part out loud, and that is not something you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to say that stuff if you don't fully embrace the numbers. Do you know what that makes you? That makes you an antiquated boomer. How dare you, boomer? Right? And this has caused, as you might imagine, a small frenzy of rage from the nerds. The push it back from the analytical community, a village of Poindexters who make their living by sharing advanced statistics, measurable outcomes, are in a tizzy. We have no problem with Jim Irsay saying this stuff. Patterns tell you what has happened, not what is going to happen, as we have said, stats, patterns, statistics, all that stuff. But Jim Irsay is saying that there's a paralysis of analysis in the NFL these days. Now, many will disagree with Irsay and say he took stupid pills long ago, but we actually agree. The numbers should not make the decisions. The dorks have flooded the minds of coaches, and let's be honest, a lot of these coaches aren't that bright. And so somebody with an Ivy League degree comes up and says, I got all the numbers, I've got the algorithms, here's exactly what's going to happen. Here's what you need to do if it's 3rd down and 2. And the coach, of course, thinking, wait a minute here, this person's much smarter than I am. I better follow the numbers. Don't want to be seen as a dinosaur. And coaches get scared. They hide behind the shield of analytics. Like, well, my gut told me to go a different direction, but the analytics, the numbers said go this way. Like in the old school days, we called these things tendencies, and they were always part of football. If the ball's on the hash mark on the short side of the field, they likely are going to go to the wide side of the field, and depending on what defense you run, they'll be more apt to call a play that goes a certain part of the defense. But those have always been a part of football, but now it's the meat and potatoes of the game. And Jim Irsay, if you believe him, maybe he's lying. He might not be telling me the truth, but I tend to think he's actually being honest on that regard. He wants the old school to come back. And the expectation is that this guy, Jeff Saturday, the TV guy, will go with his gut and play a hunch. And while this whole exercise will likely flop and we'll use Jeff Saturday as the answer to a who am I game question a couple years from now, who am I? I was a pretty boy on TV, and then I got a job with no experience other than high school football as a pro football coach. Who am I? All right. It would be a breath of fresh air, though, in a parallel dimension, if you will, if we go down that rabbit hole and this works. We're looking for that in baseball, right? We need a team in baseball to win that wins without worshiping at the altar of analytics. And in football, it's not to the levels of baseball, but it is going further and further that direction. Right? Usually what happens is things go one way, the pendulum swings back, and then you settle in the new normal, but we're in the process of pushing it that direction. Now, page 2. Why are so many NFL bigwigs absolutely flabbergasted by the Colts and their moves? Now, Jim Irsay has upset a lot of people. You thought this story would be a one-day story. It's not. It's still got legs, as we said. Jim Irsay is going off the reservation. The peanut gallery are throwing projectiles. They are harpooning Jim Irsay and the Colts. And we have certain rituals and customs in pro football. There is a method to the madness, and Jim Irsay has taken an Acme cartoon anvil and blown it to smithereens, violating the sacred orthodoxy of the NFL. Now, football lifers expect the doctrine to be followed, and that is not what's happening here. These dopes want at best, they want a retread tire. They would rather have a retread tire. I've heard a lot of, why wasn't Gus Bradley promoted or John Fox? That would have been acceptable football decorum. They've got experience. Of course, not good experience. That's like if you ran a radio station. I work in radio. If you ran a radio station and you had a person that worked at your station that had never gotten a rating, would you give him a big-time show if he was kind of like hanging out in the background? Well, probably not, because he's never done anything. Gus Bradley, one of the all-time great failures as a head coach with Jacksonville. He had 14 wins and 48 losses in Jacksonville. And then the other name, John Fox, who said, well, he was with the Broncos and they won. And okay. Last 3 years in Chicago, he was 14 and 34 with the Bears. Now, meanwhile, you should have hired a retread. Then you also have a confab, because you have a mix here. You have the race baiters in the media who are beside themselves.
Racist.
They're very upset that a white guy was hired with no coaching experience. Sound the alarm bells. I can't believe it. Oh, my God. There's a lot of clicks and ratings in that. People have made careers out of doing that kind of topic of conversation. It's good for business. It's good for commerce if you're in that world. It gets people's blood boiling. People get very upset when they hear that kind of rhetoric. And as we have said in previous episodes, welcome to our world, right? No coaching experience, getting a job. The NFL is going where radio has gone. It happens regularly in my business. We see it all the time. An ex-jock, a coach, some TV personality with no radio experience, a writer, a comedian, an actor, get radio shows without the proper skill set to do radio. And that's why, unfortunately, a lot of the radio has kind of gone down in many areas, because there's people that aren't necessarily good at it, but they get jobs, they get opportunities. But are there people complaining, I can't believe so-and-so got a radio show because they have no experience? No. But somehow coaching. Like, I could coach the Colts. Right now, I'm qualified to coach the Colts. I have years of playing video games back in the day, starting with Tecmo Bowl. I could coach. I could call the plays. All right, now, anyway, last word here. So the Colts will have a 30-year-old pass game specialist, assistant quarterback coach, someone named Parks Frazier, a name that I had never heard. He's going to serve as the de facto offensive coordinator and play caller. Parks Frazier I'd rather have Parks and Rec.
Never heard of him.
That TV show from back in the day call the plays. Anyway, is Parks Frazier a wise choice as offensive play caller? Well, Jim Irsay.
Who?
Jim Irsay has determined that this entire season is now an exercise in coloring outside the lines, treating this season as a test. No, seriously. Like, you're a kid, you give your kid a coloring book, you say, here's some crayons, color inside line. No, the kid's going to, when they first start out, they color everywhere. That's Jim Irsay. He's like, I don't know, let's see what happens. He's playing Eddie Murphy's character in The Nutty Professor, right? Buddy Love. It's all an experiment. It's all an experiment. We will see how this works out. Parks Frazier is getting the opportunity of a lifetime. You talk about a brass ring situation. An NFL play caller at age 30. He's younger than 5 guys on Indianapolis's roster. He's around the same age as a bunch of other guys. And if this turns into a day in the park and he nails the dummy run, then this guy who we've never heard of, Parks Frazier, is going to be set for 25, 30 years of high-paying jobs as an NFL, at least NFL assistant, college football assistant, eventually a head coach. Now, the flip side of that is if he flops, then he'll be delivering bologna sandwiches for Uber Eats while coaching high school defensive backs. So that is the flip side, but what an opportunity. What a chance here for this guy, and it's all part of what is going to be a fascinating science experiment, the Indianapolis Colts, and Jim Irsay knows either this goes really well, and Jeff Saturday is one of the all-time great coaches, and he found a diamond in the rough in Parks Frazier, or it's a debacle and Indianapolis ends up with a top 7 pick in the draft, and then they can start the whole process over again, go back to the drawing board one more time.